I don't know what it's going to take, but I'm going to learn how to share a message. And that was my big aha moment. And I started obsessing over the great orators of our time. And they all had one common theme, one common pattern. They were all masterful at storytelling.
You're listening to Stories from the Top, an inside guide to better business development. We are here with Matt Zaun, a speaker and consultant and the host of Stories with Traction podcast. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. For those who aren't familiar with you, can you explain what you do a little bit?
Absolutely. So I show leaders how to persuade with power through the art of strategic storytelling.
Okay. And how do you show them that through?
Yeah, so there's a few ways. So one is I have a half-day workshop that I'll take companies through. It gives them the nuts and bolts of storytelling, the framework. There's a concept that I am constantly talking about called a story bank. How and why setting a story bank set up is paramount to people achieving their goals quicker. So I do workshops, I do coaching, one-on-one coaching, as well as consulting for companies on how to strategically use storytelling. And this really affects every aspect of business, from sales to marketing to HR to onboarding to in-person talks for companies. So like think of a president or a CEO doing an all-hands-on meeting. Right. So when they're up in front of their group, their team, they need to persuade, they need to inspire their team to take the actions that they want them to take. And a lot of that goes back to what kind of stories are they sharing.
Okay, cool. So what did you originally go to school for, and how did you get into this world of coaching and storytelling?
Sure. So I originally went for business. I thought that I was going to focus on business, which now I am, but I made a detour along the way, and I got involved in politics. So my grandfather was heavily involved in politics, really inspired me to get involved in politics. And then now I've come full circle where now I'm back in the business world, but I was in the political world for about 12 years, which is to me hysterical because when I entered into the political realm, I was a horrific speaker. So not only could I not even have fathomed in my worst nightmares doing any kind of public speaking, but I could barely connect with someone one-on-one comfortably, right? So to think of going in politics is just bewildering to me, but I went in because of the plea from my grandfather. It was his last wish for me before he passed away. And then through that process of intensive trial and error and mistakes and very, very challenging circumstances early on in politics, I learned a few things regarding storytelling, and that's what really started my journey into the storytelling world.
Was there a defining moment where you realized that you needed to evolve in storytelling to succeed?
Absolutely. So my grandfather, when he passed away, there was I'll start with his last conversation with me. So I'll never forget, I'm sitting at his dining room table, and you have to keep in mind, my grandfather was a World War II veteran. He received his Purple Heart during World War II because he got half his hand blown off during a combat mission. So very much focused on helping people, helping his community, helping country. I mean, he is the embodiment of the definition of a patriot in my mind. I'll never forget, I'm at his dining room table, and he asked me a question. He says, "Matt, what did I fight for?" And I was kind of taken back by his question. And he repeated it. He said, "What did I fight for?" He said, "Did I fight so our leaders could argue, bicker, and complain and get nothing done? Is that why I put my life at risk?" He said, "Did I fight?" And he's going off on all these different things that he was really frustrated happening regarding our country. And then he said, "No, I fought so every man, woman, and child, regardless of what they'll do, can live in a free and just nation. That's what I fought for." And then he really inspired me that every morning I wake up, I need to remember what I'm fighting for. And he said, people are always worth fighting for, right? Now, leading up to this meeting, we had dozens of conversations where he implored me to get involved in politics. He was very firm on my engagement in the political world, helping leaders that have courage, have integrity, right? So there are a lot of people in the political world that do adhere to integrity, believe it or not. Sometimes they're tough to find, but they're there, right? Many of them when you really start looking around. And I was terrible at speaking at this moment. So just to give you an idea, I flunked out of my public speaking course in college. horrible speaker. Several years ago, you'd have said I was the worst communicator you've heard in your life, right? I had major social anxiety. So I immediately went into the business world, and I was the facts and figures guy. I love sitting behind a computer, looking at data points, unpacking data points. But there was this pull on me to get involved in politics because of my grandfather. He's one of the biggest heroes of my life. So I started working behind the scenes in the political world, dozens of different campaigns from a research capacity. And then eventually I landed a job working for an influential politician. And my main responsibility, well, many, but one of them was researching bills, coming up with ideas to craft bills. And the big aha moment came when my boss at the time said, hey, I need you to go talk to a group of people that want answers in regards to this one initiative. And I want to caution you, though, the people at this meeting are completely and entirely opposed to this initiative. And I'll never forget, he looked right at me and he said, and also they hate me. So more than likely, death by association, they're going to hate you too. So choose your words very carefully. Now, again, I could not do public speaking at this moment, at least not well at all. So to say I had nervousness is just an understatement, right? I was overwhelmed with fear. Couldn't sleep leading up to the meeting. I thought about every scenario in my mind that could go wrong. And I show up to this meeting. It was a disaster. I mean, everything that could go wrong went wrong. It was just horrible, man. I remember I wanted to dive under the carpet and just die. I was like, I hate this. And I ran out to my car and I slammed the door. I'll never forget this. I can almost see it as if it's happening right now. I slammed the door. I grabbed the steering wheel, and the top of my lungs, I yelled, that'll never happen again. I don't know what it's going to take, but I'm going to learn how to share a message. And that was my big aha moment. That moment, it sparked an obsession in me. And I started obsessing over the great orators of our time. What do they do? How do they connect? How do they persuade? How do they inspire? And they all had one common theme, one common pattern. They were all masterful at storytelling.
What do you think drove you to want to defeat that challenge versus I'm done with politics forever. I'm getting out of the game. Like, what do you think pushed you into attacking that challenge?
Well, you mentioned the verbiage game. There's a lot of strategy when it comes to public speaking, when it comes to storytelling. And I think from someone like myself at the time that was so data-driven, was so into strategy behind the scenes, understanding how certain numbers work and setting up systems and processes and studying patterns, a lot of that comes to play when it comes to public speaking. There's a lot of patterns. There's a lot of different things that you can do for human engagement. And that just fascinated me. So I really went in with this amount of intrigue, of just fascination. I mean, there are people that study storytelling for decades and decades, and they still learn things, right? Because it can be a pretty complex topic, for sure.
So what did you do to begin that journey of becoming a master at speaking and communication?
I made a game out of embarrassment. Okay, so for people listening to this episode that want to be really good at connecting with other people, so let's say public speaking, there's a journey you have to go through to get to that point. Now, you can make this journey agonizingly long, or you can shorten it up. Okay, so the agonizingly long piece is you can go speak at a couple events here and there, and you could take 5 to 7 years to become a really good public speaker. Or you can radically cut that time down, and you can make a game out of embarrassing yourself. So that's what I did. For 2 years, I said, I'm going to put myself in the most embarrassing situations possible. I'm going to feel that intense fear that I felt during that one disastrous talk, and I'm going to heighten it. I'm going to learn to sit in the fear. I'm going to learn that it's okay when I'm in a room full of people and it's not working out. Okay. And I kid you not, made a game out of it with a paper pen. How many times did I embarrass myself? And I made it a point to embarrass myself twice a week. Twice a week, I had to stick my neck out there, do some type of engagement that was unbelievably embarrassing for me. And I realized the main thing was I didn't die. No one ever stood up and threw a chair at me. No, I was booed. So I did a motivational talk at a comedy event once, which didn't go over well to a group. There was about 120 drunk people, so I got booed during that one. But like stuff like that, like going into environments and doing things that people would never want to do. And what happened was I learned to just sit in the embarrassment. So when I did go out and I did other kinds of talks, it was a cakewalk.
Yeah. So what were some of those? Like, I guess you did an open mic night. Was that mostly what you were doing?
Did open mic. I did improv comedy for quite some time. I did improv for
Better Than Bacon?
for 4 years. Better Than Bacon was one of them. Comedy Sports was another one. So Comedy Sports down in Philadelphia, that was a big one. And just putting myself in really uncomfortable situations for sure. And any event that there's an element of speaking. So I got involved in a ton of chamber events. Went to a bunch of those. Toastmasters was a piece of the equation. Just any type of event where I can get up and I could speak and I could make mistakes was a plus.
So when did you think, hey, I've faced this fear and learned how to communicate effectively. I should start a business and teach other people how to do this?
That's an awesome question. So in the political world, so what ended up happening was I was really research focused in politics. I was helping on numerous campaigns. And as I was building this muscle regarding storytelling, I started working with politicians from a messaging perspective. So I started writing for a lot of politicians. I started doing a lot of their messaging. I was the one that was called, hey, here's what happened. How do we turn this into a great story? How do we look at it from a positive perspective? So I would receive a lot of those calls. And one of the things in the political world is you go to a ton of events. There's a marriage of politics and business. So I was going to a lot of business events. And all of a sudden, there were a lot of people that would pull me aside after these events and say, hey, what you're doing over here, I could use that help with my sales team. I could use that help with my marketing department. Can you come talk to the people that run HR at my company? And I knew there was a need for a lot of the different mindset pieces that we do in politics because I was doing a lot of debate prep as well. So I was taking on the persona of someone's opponent, and I was literally getting paid to tear into my client. Right? It was a wild thing because if your client can withstand that level of scrutiny, that level of hostility, toxicity, if you will, because that's what we're doing, they could do well on a main debate stage. So I was doing a lot of stuff like that, a lot of techniques, a lot of skills that we do in the debate prep world and the political world that a lot of companies are not doing. And I started to adapt that muscle and then started to do workshops, and it just took off from there. And I was just doing just a lot of workshops. I primarily focus on US. I've been invited to speak internationally, have not done that yet. Primarily focus on the US. I'm up to 30 states where I've spoken in. Trying to hit 50 in the next year or two. So I'm almost there. But it was just quite the journey of getting into the workshop space, and then from there consulting happened as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. So storytelling is a big part of your brand and what you teach people. Is it all just in the political world that you learned that skill, or did you have any mentors or anyone who kind of guided you in that storytelling world?
Yeah. So outside of the politics, I've had many mentors in the political world, but outside of politics, there's a gentleman that really sticks out to me. His name is Ryan Avery. Phenomenal speaker. He's my favorite keynote speaker ever. Just an incredible human being. A lot of really great skills that he has shared with me, and a lot of trial and error that he's gone through to kind of save me from the same mistakes. So early on in my speaking career, he kind of took me under his wing and gave me a lot of great mentorship. I owe a lot to him of what I've been able to achieve in the speaking world.
So when it came time to launching your business, did you bring some of your schooling background in to help to do that? Or like, what was your strategy to turn your skill and practice into an actual profitable business?
A great question. Great question. So I think it was focusing on the simplicity of the business model. So the way my business model works is I get paid for speaking engagements, so speaker fees. And really, it's how many can I do a year? So X amount equate to X amount of dollars. That's really the base of it. And then from those speaking engagements, consulting contracts come. So it's a very simplistic way, I believe, to run a business as far as from the main business model. And then the complexity comes with marketing. I mean, as you know, marketing can be pretty complex and setting up sales funnels and different channels. But really, as far as my schooling, I would say no. I would say really trial and error, leaning on great mentorship. The National Speakers Association was great in many ways. I plugged into them for about 2 years. I would say just doing it and then learning. So I think you do learn, adjust. And if the quicker you do that process, the quicker you could step back and you could say, wow, like it's a completely different world than even it was a couple months ago. Meaning if you continue at that pace, it continues to change. But the simplicity of it is it's pretty simple, right? It's X amount equals Y on the other side.
Mm-hmm. So what types of businesses are you helping with storytelling, and what are they using that for in their business applications?
A lot of companies focus on sales growth. So it's very common for me to go into an organization, speak to sales reps, and make sure that the stories that they're sharing during their sales process are the ones that are going to close more sales. Okay, so I'm really big on story banks. Okay, so story bank. Let's look at it from a traditional bank type perspective, right? You put money into an account, so you make deposits so that you can quickly withdraw that cash, right? Money in, deposits, you have those withdrawals. Same is true when it comes to story banks, okay? So when you put stories in your story bank, you're pulling them out to share with a prospect to flip that person from prospect into client. Okay, so when it comes to a sales story bank, there's really only 5 stories that need to be in a sales story bank. Okay, so it's not complex. 5. I recommend people viewing it as their quote unquote hit stories. Just like there's hit songs on the radio, every organization needs their hit stories when it comes to sales. Okay, typically about 5. When it comes to HR, there's typically about 5 that should be focused on. So from a hiring perspective, so if a company is having a big burst of hiring, where they have hiring managers that are out there, they're conducting interviews, they really want to be focused on the top 5 stories that they're putting in the interview. Now, whether they share them or not is another thing. But when the job candidate asks a question, whatever that question is, it shouldn't just be a quick response. They should respond and then back it with a story. Right? When it comes to onboarding meetings, a lot of those meetings, those sessions for bringing in new employees, a lot of them, they need to focus really on 5. Okay. So I really like that 5 perspective when it comes to sales and when it comes to HR, when it comes to the onboarding piece or the interview piece and then the onboarding piece. Now, when it comes to marketing, it's a whole different animal. When it comes to marketing, you could have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories in your marketing story bank. So if you were to look at my marketing story bank right now, you would see over 500 stories. Now that's been built over time, right? Mm-hmm. But when it comes to me from a workshop perspective, it's me coming into organizations and teaching them these are the stories that you should be sharing and then building those stories out. It could take some time to actually get those stories set.
What do you think is so powerful about using storytelling in sales and HR versus just a streamlined and clear message of what you're looking to get out of someone?
Like as far as like facts and figures versus stories?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's talk about the importance of stories in general. Okay, so let's look at it from a quick timeline, and then I want people to recognize it's not only important in business and sales, it's important in life in general, right? So we've had this major change that I don't think a lot of people have talked about culturally speaking. Okay, that major change happened with the launch of the iPhone. Okay, so the iPhone launches in 2007. Smartphones didn't change our culture, though, until 2014, 10 years ago. Okay, so I want you to think how long human beings have been on planet Earth. A long time. We're talking about a very small sliver of that time when it comes to just a decade. So what happened in 2014? By 2014, your millennials, your Gen Xers, and your baby boomers were all addicted to a device in the palm of their hand. Okay, so some people might be listening to this episode thinking, who cares? What does that mean to me? What does it matter? What that device has done is it has ripped people's attention spans from the frame. Okay, 10 years ago, people actually gave you their attention. Today, you must earn it. And you earn it by taking stories with a point. So these are intentional, strategic stories. And what you're doing is you're compacting your experiences down into these stories to pull your audience in. So it's incredibly important when it comes to just life in general. In addition, there's this great tsunami that is in the process of hitting us, and that is AI technology. Okay, we will need to be better storytellers due to AI, not worse storytellers, because right now things are less boring. You can write blogs with AI. You can write captivating emails with AI. You can write the draft of speeches with AI, right? So now when it comes to the written word, a lot of people are better now because of these tools. The problem is you go and you meet them in real life and they're the most boring people in the world. There's a disconnect. I'm actually hearing this more and more where these companies, they rely so much on AI, and then their leaders will stand up at an event and they'll try to be speaking the best they can to their team. They're boring them to tears. They're losing the ability to connect. So we need to be better storytellers, not worse storytellers.
That's really interesting. So moving forward, where do you see the storytelling? I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but how do you see storytelling evolving with AI and all that stuff? And what is your plans for your business as things continue to change exponentially every year with the new technology stuff coming out?
Great question. There's a few things that AI cannot replace, which is compassion, love, and empathy. Okay, so compassion, love, and empathy. When it comes to human connection, I think it's really important for us to understand just the power of that. I mean, look at what social media has done to humans. Like we're more connected through social media. We're more isolated than we've ever been. There's more loneliness than there's ever been. So I think what AI is going to do is it's really going to position those of us who continue to hone in on our storytelling skills. It's going to set us apart in a big, big way. I think with the level of noise, so now this is more like the marketing piece, but with the level of noise out in the world, we're going to need to figure out how to get above that noise through stories. Plus, another thing too, recently someone asked me this question, and it was the first time that I had ever been asked this question before. The person said, can't we just feed into AI to get the stories we need for our sales story bank, for our marketing story bank, for the HR component? The problem is when you're talking about generative AI, it doesn't know the stories, your personal stories, right? You can feed it. It's not going to share with you the story of that time you sat down with the one prospect and the person was scared out of their mind. They took a risk on your company from a service or a product perspective, and then it became amazing for them, and now all they do is talk about it. It's not going to know that. And a lot of these like more nuanced, more personal stories, it's not going to know that. So I think it's important to recognize, yes, we can use AI for idea generation, but we can't utilize it as a crutch when it comes to our personal stories. Like if you were to go through even my marketing story bank, a lot of them are personal stories. Some of them are family stories with business themes intertwined. Yeah, it doesn't know how to generate that for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like it would be pointless to generate stories that aren't personal, because the whole power of it is kind of bringing yourself into, like, it's almost bringing your history and story into the interaction to make that emotional connection versus just, here's a very interesting story about this guy, like some historical figure or something.
Well, sure. And then also, like, I'm already seeing this is people relying so much on AI for pictures and video that it's AI. I mean, it's clear as day it's AI. And I think that what might in the future get above the head and shoulders when it comes to noise is more of that authenticity piece. There are people that I follow on social media that every single thing they put out is AI, and it's become more easy to scroll past. And what's stopping me now when it comes to like those scroll stoppers is the real pictures of real people, the real stories, right? That authenticity, sometimes getting vulnerable when it's appropriate to do so. But I see that more and more is, are we going to lose touch with what it means to actually be authentic when it comes to that?
Yeah, that's what I'm very curious to see as the video AI. You see like the Sora demos and stuff. Is once people are able to generate that type of stuff, it's just going to continue to flood social media with more and more content to where everyone's going to be posting so much content all the time that's kind of personal because they generated it, but if it's not real authentic actual footage of them or their environment and what they're doing, it's really just more noise, and everyone's going to scroll faster, like you were saying. It's not engaging to see something that someone just pumped out through GPT.
Sure. And people still listen to 3-hour podcasts, and they still binge watch Netflix. So from an attention perspective, people are willing to give you their attention if it's a really good story, right? I think, yes, there's going to be a ton of noise, but also there are certain patterns that come into play, right? So hooking someone's attention right out of the gate, diving into that story that has that authenticity, that vulnerability, and then the call to action, right? So very simplistic when it comes to pattern perspective. Harder to do, right? You got to learn. It's a trained skill to learn how to do that. But I think even with as much noise as out there, it's us honing in on our own messages, on our own stories, because we're going to have to get even better than we are now, right? We're going to have to continue to develop and get better. And every company out there is going to have to get better. Every company out there is going to have to figure out how to get above the noise. And a big piece of that is going to be those strategic, keyword being strategic, storytelling.
So, Matt, if people want to get a hold of you or learn more or check out your podcast, how can they do that?
Best way is storieswithtraction.com.
Very interesting, Matt. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We have a couple other episodes we're going to be doing in the future where we talk about why storytelling works and how to engage an audience when public speaking. So, Matt, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Cool. Stories from the Top is your guide to successful business development. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or find Edge of Cinema on YouTube. Stories from the Top is an Edge of Cinema production, hosted by Matthew Skura and Jeremy Schmidt. To learn more or get in touch, visit edgeofcinema.com/podcast.